I paid off the debt that would have taken the only home my daughter and I had left. By morning, my mother disappeared, a legal mess followed, and it took years, a funeral, and a stack of receipts to finally choose my peace over our blood. The first winter morning I noticed something missing wasn't when I leaned down to grab the bag of rock salt and saw the empty corner where my mother kept her boots. It wasn't even when I padded down the hallway and felt, in that strange way you feel a draft inside a sealed house, that the air behind her door wasn't her air anymore. It was at the kitchen table, sun dragging itself over the back fence, when my eyes came to rest on the thick, creased envelope I had slept next to all night. County treasurer receipts, a cashier's check stub, and a printout with a case number. I'd held that envelope like a talisman, sinking money I didn't really have into a future I desperately wanted for my daughter. The coffee sputtered like a tired engine. I stared at the steam. In the reflection on the carafe, I saw my mouth moving, soundless, rehearsing a conversation we never had. "We're okay now, Mom," I would have said. "They can't take the house." Maybe she would have cried, hugged me for too long. Maybe we would have made pancakes. The French press hissed. The radiator knocked. I set the envelope down, walked to her room, and found the bed made in a way she never made it, a tight hotel tuck for a bed no one planned to sleep in again. Her closet door was ajar, a blind eye. Hangers clacked together with a sound like teeth. My daughter June shuffled in, hair sticking up, her pink fuzzy socks going shoe over the laminate. "Where's Nana?" she asked, rubbing her left eye with her knuckle. She always rubbed the left eye when she was nervous. I stood there with the world swinging softly on its hinges. There wasn't a note. Her toothbrush was gone. The bowl she ate oatmeal from every morning, with the blue rim and the chip on the side, was clean and dry, upside down in the dish rack like it had been placed there to look helpful. "I covered the debt," I said out loud, just to hear it have weight somewhere. "I covered the debt to keep our home." By morning, she was gone. Before it broke, the house on Linden Avenue smelled like dust and pine sol and whatever you get from old wood banisters rubbed down by the same hands for 30 years. The front stoop had a crack from a winter that got drunk on ice. The backyard was a neat rectangle where someone had once tried to grow tomatoes and stopped at the promise. My father built the shed with swing doors the summer before he got sick. After he died, my mother started buying ceramic lighthouses at thrift stores and putting them on top of the kitchen cabinets, as if a room could need a dozen warnings in the night. I moved back from Cincinnati when June was 4 and the city stopped being somewhere I could pretend to afford. At the time, I told myself it was practical. Rent was a scream. My ex had taken a job in Columbus. I had a little girl who needed 2 more hands than I had. But there was more under that. My mother's breathing over the phone had changed, tighter around the edges, and not from cigars or stares. There was a restlessness in her voice I knew from childhood, when she rearranged furniture at midnight and pushed bills into drawers. "Come home," she said, voice bright in a way that made me suspicious. "You can save money here. It'll be like old times, Kay." Old times weren't kind, but the house was too loud to be lonely in. It creaked inside and sometimes sounded exactly like a person walking around upstairs at night, which I found comforting. June liked the way the pears rotted sweet in Mr. Patel's tree and fell with soft thuds into our yard. In September, she would ask him if she could have one, and he would rinse it under his hose and hand it to her like a medal. I got a job as the school secretary at Belmont Elementary because my laugh sounded like I'd always worked behind a desk in a room with copy paper stacked in reams. Ms. Jordan, the principal, took one look at my application and said, "You survived toddlers. You can handle parents." June was bright and serious. "Do you think the moon ever sleeps, Mom?" she asked me from the back seat, face tipped up like a flower on the rare days it was clear enough to see the mess of stars. She was 5 when she had her first fainting spell at the fall festival. She was standing under the paper lanterns Mr. Perez had strung across the gymnasium, talking to me about which cupcake had the prettiest frosting, then her eyes rolled back. I still sometimes feel the slack weight of her even when she's awake. I remember the way the room snapped into a clarity I didn't ask for, the exact color of the gym floor, the sound of a mother dropping her purse, a balloon stuck in the rafters bobbing like it was trying to get our attention. By the time we walked out of Dayton Children's Hospital with an accordion folder and a schedule of maintenance appointments, I had become a person who wrote down everything. Her fever charts, the number for hemonc on my jeans pocket, and the list of what she would say when someone in the cafeteria told her she looked brave with her hair falling out. "I don't like bravery," she told me, stickers peeling at the edges on her notebook like petals. "I like cartoons." The rooms on the 7th floor had ceilings with square panels that June said looked like pancake batter. She would lie on the bed in the hospital gown with ducks on it and point at the patterns, telling me where the batter was thick and where bubbles were coming up. The nurses brought her ice chips she pretended were dragon scales. On one early morning, as the infusion pump clicked its metronome, she craned her neck and whispered, "Sometimes I feel like the house is waiting for us." A child's certainty impossible to argue with. She was 6. My sister Lena showed up when she could, which meant when someone else would hear about it. She breezed through the front door with a gust of cold air, calling, "How are my favorite girls?" and putting 2 paper bags of groceries on the counter like a magician reveal. The bags would always have fancy yogurt no one in our house knew what to do with, frozen dinners with ingredients June couldn't have on her meds, and a big pillar candle that smelled like a beach house. Lena had a good job as an office manager at a dental clinic in Kettering. She had blouses in jewel colors and a way of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was about to say something mean. "You know," she said one evening, stirring a pot of tomato soup she was letting scorch, "you could ask Evan to do more." "It's not all on you, Kayla." Evan tried. He liked June, but he wasn't built for doctors or long spans of quiet waiting. We were friends who had once held a future between our hands like a fragile, beautiful bug. He showed up with groceries when I texted him emergency grocery lists, and he always took the trash out. He sent June videos of his dog. His new girlfriend, a sweet woman named Abby, knitted June a pink hat with a pom-pom the size of a small planet. "Family takes care of family," my mother said, rinsing a bowl with too much water flowing over it. "A house is for everyone," she added, and looked at the ceiling when she said it, like she was reminding the house of its job. The envelopes in the mail got angrier. A red stamp here, a perforated edge there, polite language hardening around the facts. "Delinquent taxes," one said, in a font that always reminds me of a hard face. I put it on my mother's place at the kitchen table, next to her coffee and the crossword. She paled in a way that made me think of a bowl left in the sun. "For the love of," she started, then caught herself because June was sitting at the table, painstakingly drawing a lighthouse with a green crayon. "It's fine," Mom said, mouth smiling while her eyes stayed somewhere else. "It's a mix-up." She stuffed the envelope in a drawer that stuck, the one by the microwave, the drawer that is the graveyard of an American kitchen. Rubber bands, a stranger's keys, old birthday candles. I imagined the drawer eating the envelope, no one ever prying its mouth open, the house floating along in its own weather patterns. When I asked again, the next day, she said, "Your father and I took a second mortgage when he got sick. There were bills." She said it like it was a shared past. "Then the interest. It's okay, Kay. We'll figure it out." We. The most dangerous word in a house where some people worked and others floated. Pressure built like a storm in a summer town. The air was thick and everything slow, but you braced anyway. The county sent a notice about a sheriff's sale with a date stamped at the top like a birthday you didn't want. When I called the number printed at the bottom, a woman with a voice like the other side of the hill said, "You can enter into a payment plan, ma'am, but you'll need to bring a down payment to the treasurer's office by the end of the month. Without that, it proceeds as scheduled." I sat with June on the living room rug with the worn pattern of leaves and explained more than I should have about how houses get taken. She touched the place where the rug had thinned to threads, pushing a finger through like a cat. "What happens to our couch?" she asked. I told her the couch would follow us if we asked it to, and she nodded, satisfied. My mother sniffed. "I will not have this conversation in front of her," she said, audibly enough that it was in front of her. "You're scaring her." "You could sell some of the lighthouses," I said, trying humor. She pinched her mouth and then she laughed, which was worse. I took on a second job bussing tables at Parkmont Diner on Far Hills, where the booths had tiers that had been repaired with silver duct tape, and the waitresses could carry 4 plates on their arms like some sort of miracle. I worked the after-school shift, and then the late one when the bars emptied and men with sad eyes put too much hot sauce on their eggs. I came home smelling like grease and coffee and metal. The training manager showed me how to slide plates onto a wrist like a bracelet and said, "Don't let anybody tell you this isn't a skill." Evan took June to his place 2 nights a week so I could work the late shift. He set up a little bed for her in his second bedroom with cartoon dinosaur sheets and texted me photos of her sleeping with her hands in fists under her chin. "She has your serious sleeping face," he said life-soft, rubbing his thumb over the edge of his phone as if it was her cheek. On Tuesday nights, I clipped coupons like it was my job. I sold my father's old Fender to a man with a gentle voice who promised to play it. I pulled out a box in the closet stuffed with the detritus of several years, a mason jar of coins, 2 scratch-off lottery tickets, a stack of Polaroids from the late 90s with edges gone pink, the leather wallet Dad used to carry with his name pressed into it in gold foil. I held the wallet for a while. I pressed my thumb into the D like I might open something secret. The school community organized a fundraiser for June because Miss Jordan is the kind of woman who makes things move. There were hand-lettered signs and a silent auction for a gift basket full of spa soaps no one wanted, but everyone pretended to want. The gym smelled like rubber soles and floor cleaner and sugar. June sat in a metal folding chair behind the bake sale table and looked solemnly at the cupcakes like they were a job. My mother stood under the basketball hoop with her arms folded, telling anyone who would listen about her brave granddaughter, pale, Little House on the Prairie style, using the struggle to warm her like a shawl. "It's always something with our family," she said, and people placed 20s into a paper coffee cup with June written on it in black marker and eyes that leaned in sympathy. Lena showed up in a bright red coat and kissed the tops of our heads like we were babies. "You're my hero," she said to my mother, and my mother made a face like someone had stolen her best line. June spiked a fever that week, because that's how fevers work in houses where you have money do. I held a cold compress to her forehead in the ER while she watched an episode of a cartoon about a cat who drives a fire truck for a reason that made sense to someone once in a boardroom. A doctor with hair that was clearly intended to be tousled in a charming way told me the plan, and I nodded like the plan was something that could be folded and put in a pocket. I texted Ms. Jordan to say I would be out the next morning. She replied, "Take what you need," which is the phrase that makes me cry. After the fever broke, I took a day off, left June with my mother watching movies on the couch, and went down to the Montgomery County Treasurer's office with an envelope full of cash I hated touching. The building had fluorescent lighting that hummed and a guard who gave me a nod like we were in a club I didn't want membership in. I took a number. I adjusted the strap of my bag and tried not to do the math in my head that had beads of sweat on it. "Morning," said a woman with a nameplate that read Angela K. in a cheerful font. The glass between us cut her smile into 2. "What can we do for you?" She said it like she was part of the arrangement, like we were both about to lift the same heavy thing. I told her I wanted to stop the sale. I said it twice, oddly, because I needed to hear it twice. She looked up the case on her screen and said, "Okay, we need X amount to keep it from going to the list, and then you can set up a monthly for the remainder." Her pen tapped the desk in front of the glass like a drum teaching a tempo. I slid the envelope under the glass like a supplicant. She counted the cash without commentary. It looked obscene, bills in a place you spend them without exchanging anything you can hold. When I walked back out onto the sidewalk, the sky was March cruel and the wind managed to poke its fingers under my sweater no matter how closely I held it to myself. I felt successful and ridiculous. The receipt in my pocket was something I wanted to show to strangers so I could say, "Look, I'm holding it together." It didn't feel like a victory when I put the receipt on the kitchen table and told my mother. She sat down like she had been standing for too long. "Oh, honey," she said in a voice that didn't belong to her. She reached across and put her hand over mine, and it was almost tender, the way a stage kiss almost looks real from the balcony. "You saved us." We had grilled cheese that night and opened a can of tomato soup that actually tasted good. June told a joke she made up about a giraffe who couldn't find the bathroom. I took out the trash and there was a full moon. This is a note I always want to put in the story. The moon was full and low, like it had gotten tired and come down to rest in the tree line. The line crossed in silence. It was maybe 1:30 a.m. I know the time because I had been stuck between wanting to sleep and wanting to not sleep if she needed me, and I looked at my phone 100 times the way a person checks a locked door. I heard the low murmur of voice in my mother's room, saw the slice of light under her door, and assumed she was on the phone with her friend Trish. The names change, but there's always a Trish. When I woke in the morning, the house had that peculiar stillness of absence. It reminded me of how rooms feel after a fight you weren't in. I made coffee without thinking. When the muscle memory kicked in and I reached for her mug, the one with the summer camp logo she stole from me in 2003, it wasn't there. June was still asleep on the couch, mouth open in a little O, a cartoon playing at low volume, the remote on her chest rising and falling. I walked down the hall calling Mom, soft like someone telling a story. I knocked, turned the handle, and pushed open her door. The bed was made tightly, as if a stranger had done it. 2 drawers stood open, their contents smoothed out with palms like somebody trying to make a mess look like a pattern. On the dresser, a single earring, one of the hoops she wore almost daily, like a comma left in a sentence that didn't want to end. In the closet, the space where her winter coat had been was a blank posture. The top shelf where she kept old tax returns and letters in a shoebox had a rectangle of dust. Her toothbrush was gone. The light on her phone charger was off. By the kitchen door, the hook where she kept the car keys was empty. The second set she swore she lost months ago, also gone. The little ceramic lighthouse with a cracked window that used to sit next to the toaster had been removed, and the circle of clean under it looked like a missing tooth. I called her cell. It went straight to voicemail. Her voice prom was full, her voice cutting off at think. I texted Lena. Where's Mom? Call me. No response. I texted again. Please tell me you've heard from her. Please. June yawned and sat up, rubbing her eye. Where's Nana? She asked again, because the day had reset to a place where asking made things happen. I think she went out early, I said, hearing how wrong the word early sounded for the way my mother moved through the world. We ate toast at the kitchen table like people pretending it normal. We were silent in a way that had volume. The mail slipped through the slot and onto the floor. I will always remember that sound. It had weight, the sound of paper on hardwood. I found an old envelope with a forwarding address label peeled back to reveal layers. There was a note in my mother's handwriting scribbled on a torn-off corner of a magazine page. Trisha's number, the top line read, and below it, a Florida area code. I wanted to laugh. Of course, Florida. I stepped out onto the porch in socks and felt the cold try to eat my toes. I called the number. A woman answered, cheerful like a ferry boat. Trish, I said. This is Kayla, Deb's daughter. A pause, then, hey, sweetie, in a voice that did not mean sweetie. I'm not sure. Is my mother with you? I blurted. I considered the ethics of asking her to put me on speaker so my mother would be trapped by politeness. Trish said nothing for long enough that I heard a gull in the background and the low thrum of people on a boardwalk. She's not with me, she answered finally. Look, Kayla. She was talking to this guy, Rick. You know how she's been since Ray passed. I think she just needed some air. My mother doesn't take air at 6 in the morning without telling me, I said, but we both knew I sounded like a person trying to talk a wave back. I went back into the kitchen and poured another cup of coffee I didn't need, saw my hands shaking like a joke. The breaking point wasn't a door slam, and that makes it worse for me. It was a quiet theft. It was the sound of a car pulling away, muted by a night that didn't feel responsible. I looked at the envelope on the table with the county seal and clearance stamp and felt simultaneously like I had both done everything right and failed some test I didn't know was happening. I took June to school because the world has momentum, and then I drove to the Montgomery County Recorder's office because I felt something under the floor, the way you feel a space where a board should be. The building smelled like previous rain and old paper. Behind a counter, a young woman with a loose bun and a cardigan leaned over a computer, like she was waiting for it to share a secret. I'd like to look up a deed, I said. It is surprising how quickly you pick up a language you never wanted to learn. She typed our address without asking for my ID and clicked something. Okay, she said. Looks like there was a quitclaim deed filed. Let me just, yes, 2 weeks ago. She used her fingernail on the mouse, clicking like a nervous habit. She printed something. Here you go. The paper trembled a little because my hand trembled. The words were simple and terrible. A quitclaim deed from Deborah May Morgan to Lena Morgan. A notary acknowledgement I did not recognize. An effective date that slid my stomach down my body into my shoes. It meant what it looked like it meant. On the way out, I stopped at a poster on the wall about property fraud prevention. Call if you suspect, it said in bold, and I wanted to take a red marker and write, I suspect everything, what now? I called Lena from the parking lot, the paper on the passenger seat like a passenger. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, like we were meeting up for coffee. I saw it, I said, because I couldn't make my mouth shape anything else. I saw the quitclaim. She sighed. Mom needed someone reliable to handle things. Lena had a voice that did well in waiting rooms. It's just a formality, Kayla. You're safe there. It's for the paperwork. The bank. So we don't have to worry. We? You weren't even living there, Lena, I said, keeping my voice low because coming from me, loud sounded dangerous. I paid the taxes yesterday. I used my savings, You didn't ask me, she shot back. You always do this. You swoop in with some dramatic gesture and then act like the hero. I've been paying for things you don't even know about. The roof. Mom's dental. Grown-up stuff. I have things in my name, Kayla. That's what this is. I will show you the receipts, I said, because receipts had become sacred. And then something made me laugh, a reflex I couldn't stop. Receipts. The proof we ask the world to take because we know it is busy. I don't have time for this, she said, and hung up on me, which is a part of it that still makes me feel 9 years old. I sat on the curb outside the recorder's office and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes until the colors pulsed. A woman walked past with a child in a Halloween costume even though it was March. The child wore a cape and held her mother's hand like a flag. I called legal aid. The man on the phone said, we can set you up with a phone intake. Are you available this week? In a voice so calm I wanted to climb into it like a bed. We scheduled an appointment for Thursday at noon. He told me to bring any documentation I had. He said, breathe, which is a word that sometimes feels like a command. At home, I collected papers. I became a crow. Receipts, my check stubs, bank statements, the county treasurer printout with the stamp I wanted to frame. I tucked everything into a blue sky binder because the brand name felt cruel. When I got to the bottom of the stack, there was a letter addressed to my mother from a credit card company with my name half hidden in the top corner. It was a marketing ploy, probably, but my brain tripped. I logged into my credit report, fingers sweating on the keyboard. There they were, 2 store cards I hadn't opened, balances I didn't recognize. The last payment had been made in a town I had never been to, a gas station that meant nothing to me. I called the number. The woman said, we can dispute this. It may have been a mistake, and I almost corrected her. Not a mistake, a decision. I changed the locks. I did it myself, standing on a chair from the kitchen. The metal cool and tough in my hand. It felt like trying to hold onto a river. I told Evan. He brought over 2 bags of groceries and put them away without saying anything about where things should go. He leaned against the counter and said, do you want me to try Lena? I shook my head. We listened to the clock. The house ticked. Somewhere upstairs, a pipe moaned and then went quiet. The reveal began at legal aid and finished in my daughter's bedroom. Ms. Morgan, Mark DeWitt said, sliding the blue binder back to me with an impressed nod. He looked like someone who had once wanted to be a teacher. You've done more than most clients do before they walk in here. That helps a lot. He explained things in straightforward sentences. It was your mother's house. She had the right to convey it. A quitclaim doesn't guarantee anything except that she gave whatever interest she had to your sister. It's a way to transfer property quickly. It's not illegal. I nodded like we were both on a dock looking at a boat I didn't know how to sail. But I paid the taxes. Yes, he said, and we can use that to assert an equitable claim. We can file a lease pendens to cloud title, which will let anyone who tries to buy it know there's a dispute. We can file for a declaratory judgment or a constructive trust. Ohio courts will sometimes recognize a contribution like yours in determining who gets what if there's a sale. In the meantime, Lena cannot just put you out. You're an occupant with a legitimate claim and a child with medical needs. If she tries to file an eviction, we can argue this isn't the proper venue. A housing court judge might send it up for resolution in civil court. I blinked back tears. Will we be okay? I asked, knowing he couldn't promise it. He didn't, which made me trust him. You have options, he said. And you have documentation. That matters. That night, I tucked June into bed with a story about a house that grew legs in the night and walked around the neighborhood to see what everyone was doing, then came back and sat down like it had never moved. She was quiet. I thought she had fallen asleep until she said, "Nana said something to Aunt Lena on the phone once." I heard it. What did you hear? I asked, trying to keep my voice a place she could walk. She said, June rolled onto her back and looked at the ceiling. She said we should sell fast so we don't have to watch her be sick anymore. She said she loves me, but it's hard to see me all weird. She paused, then added, "Am I weird?" "No," I said, and it came from somewhere deep. "You are not weird. You are my favorite person." Some grown-ups say things they don't know how to say because they are scared. My mouth formed words my spine understood. And sometimes grown-ups don't do the hard part even when they should. June nodded like she had known that already. "Is that what she did?" she asked. I told her yes. A text arrived on my phone from an unknown number with a Florida area code. It was a photo. My mother on a beach wearing sunglasses that made her look like someone's idea of glamour, and a man next to her with a chest like a tanning bed had done its worst. They were smiling as if they hadn't left anything behind. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and emailed it to myself because I had become a person who saved things. I read an article about how to handle fraudulent credit accounts and filled out a form. I wrote down dates on a fresh page because dates had become my lifeline. On a Sunday evening, Lena showed up at the front door with a man I recognized as her on-and-off boyfriend, Nick. He had the posture of someone who spent a lot of time thinking about himself and not much time thinking about others. "We need to talk," she said, already inside the house when air came in around her. "Maybe we should talk outside," I said, glancing at June on the couch with her blanket and a popsicle. June looked up at me with the X-ray gaze of a child who knows when adults are lying. "We need keys," Lena said. "And we need you to agree to showings. I'm putting the house on the market." I felt my whole body go quiet. "You're not," I said. "Not until this is sorted." "I own it," Lena said, chin out, eyes bright with the adrenaline of confrontation. "I can do what I want. And you can stop playing the victim." Mom did what she needed to do. Nick stepped closer in a way he thought was intimidating. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," he said, as if he had written the script on a napkin armrest. I picked up a folder from the foyer table, the one I had started keeping near the door like a fire extinguisher. I slid the county receipt out, then the lease pendens filing legal aid had sent me, then the letter from the pediatrician about June's treatment I had asked for in a fit of desperation. "We're not doing it anyway until a judge says what we're doing," I said. "And if you bring anyone here without my consent, I will call the police and use this folder as a prop like a woman in a TV show." We all stood there in the front hall with the wood floor. My father had refinished the summer. He decided he could do anything. Lena looked at June and something like shame crossed her face and then left, like a cloud over a fast sky. "This is ridiculous," she said. "I'll have my lawyer call your lawyer." She turned on her heel and walked out like someone making an exit on a stage where the audience has to move their feet out of the aisle. Police would later tell me this was a civil matter. I would come to loathe the phrase, even as I loved what it meant. No one would put me and my daughter out into the cold like a transaction. It would be a slow fight instead of one with sirens. Meanwhile, life insisted on being itself. June got tired and then felt better. We went to Belmont's spring fair, and she won a goldfish in a plastic bag only to name it even if. People dropped off casseroles with those plastic noodles on top that my mother would have refused, and that I ate gratefully with a fork, standing at the counter while June colored at the table. May came and the backyard smelled like the memory of a July that had not happened yet. Crisis doesn't keep you from noticing small joy. Mr. Patel's wife, Reena, left a basket of pears on our porch with a note that said, "Pernicious squirrels." She always used precise words. I learned how to patch holes in drywall from a YouTube video with a pleasant-voiced man from Minnesota. I showed June how to make paper cranes. We made a flock and hung them on invisible thread in her window, a colony of birds frozen mid-flight and always almost moving. The fallout arrived in a phone call you could hear from across the room. I was filling out a form and June was playing hospital with Barbie on the rug. The phone rang with my mother's name on it. My hands went cold. "Kayla," Trish said when I answered, and the way she said my name told me one thing before she told me another. "Don't panic," she said, which is another word like breathe. When you know means you should panic. "What happened?" "She had a stroke," she said. "They say it was massive. They got her to the hospital, and she's in ICU, but you should prepare yourself." I sat down on the bottom step of the stairs because my legs forgot how to be legs. I looked at the banister where my father had sanded out a gouge and smoothed it until it was shine. "Is she conscious?" I asked, like the answer would let me extract something from her that I needed. "No," she said. "I'm sorry." And I believed that she was. "I'm not going," I told Evan later, standing in the kitchen with the refrigerator humming loudly enough to be company. Even if I could get time off, even if I had someone to watch June, I can't sit in a hospital 1,000 miles away and pretend we were close at the end. "You don't have to," he said. "It won't fix anything for her or for you." A week later, my mother was dead. The funeral was small and held in a room with beige chairs. The funeral director had a voice like someone who would hand you a warm towel in an airport. Lena organized it and stood with her hand on the back of my mother's chair like she owned that, too. I stood next to June, who wore a navy dress. Abby had found her with a Peter Pan collar that made me think of a book I used to hide in under the covers with a flashlight. People put their hands on my forearm and said, "She loved you," with that authoritative tone of people who didn't know us but liked to narrate. During the quiet, someone put on that old song about the road. Lena cried noiselessly, tears sliding down like models. I felt nothing and then everything. A wave knocked me down and I sat in a chair in a corner and watched people take paper plates of store-bought cookies. Mr. Patel squeezed my shoulder. Ms. Jordan hugged me, her breath steady and familiar. After the funeral, in the dim hallway outside the bathroom, Lena handed me an envelope. "For you," she said. Inside was a letter from a lawyer. It was brittle with its own self-importance. Deb had made a will in Florida 2 months before she left, leaving all right, title, and interest in the house to Lena. There was also a note from Lena's attorney giving me 30 days to vacate. "I'm being generous," she said. "I know you need to." "To what?" "To uproot a kid recovering from chemo because you want to sell a house you didn't pay a dime to save." I cut across her words, shocking myself. "Do what you need to do, Lena. But do it in court. And bring all your adult receipts." "Don't be dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes like gaslight. "You act like I'm doing something to you." June approached us then, as if she had been magnetized by the frequency of our voices. "Is it over?" she asked, tugging my sleeve, referring to the funeral, but it worked for everything else. "Not yet," I said, and then I crouched to her level and said, "But it will be." Lena filed an eviction in municipal court, which legal aid moved to dismiss, because this wasn't a landlord-tenant matter, it was a title dispute. The judge, a man with the air of someone who had seen everything and counted it in his pockets, agreed and told Lena she could file in the right court if she wanted to make something of it. She did. We went to a mediation in a room that smelled like carpet that had been cleaned too many times. We sat at a conference table with wood so shiny it reflected our mouths moving. Mark spoke and I watched Lena's face try on expressions. We proposed. We offered to buy her out with a refinance. My credit was bruised from the night my mother left. We patched it with letters and explanations and 3 months of on-time everything. Ms. Jordan wrote a letter saying moving would be materially harmful to June's well-being. The pediatrician wrote one, too, careful with his few words. The mediator smiled like a camp counselor. We crafted together something that looks like peace from a distance. Here's the thing, Mark said, softly, on a break where he let me cry into a stack of napkins. We can argue equitable lien, unjust enrichment. You'll win something. But this will take years and eat you. If we can settle. We got an appraisal. The number made me nauseous. Lena argued for a value that assumed we were in a flusher market. We dragged our folders across that glossed wood surface until finally they slid to a stop. We agreed on a buyout. I would refinance and take the house, paying her a sum that left her looking pleased and me looking like breath. I asked for one thing in writing, something small, maybe even petty. The ceramic lighthouses? They were mine, to box or to pitch, without input. She signed. It was a mercy disguise. June finished maintenance therapy 2 months later. She rang the bell at Dayton Children's and the entire hallway clapped. She looked around, at the nurses who had learned the exact way to ask before they touched her, at the other kids with their flags and hats, and smiled a smile I hadn't seen since she was a toddler eating watermelon on the porch in August. We took a picture and I framed it and set it on the mantel next to a single ceramic lighthouse I had decided to keep, the one with a tiny crack in the paint in the shape of a line break. The house got quieter. Not empty, not like that morning, but like a room releasing tension after a long-held breath. I fixed things I could fix. I learned the hum of the sump pump, the sound of the furnace when it was almost not working. I signed the refinance papers in a room with potted plants that no one had watered. I went home with a folder full of fresh documents, and I slid the new deed into my blue sky binder. I sat on the floor and leaned against the couch and cried for 10 minutes, and then stood up and made dinner. Sometimes the phone rang with a Florida number, and I let it go. Sometimes I walked by my mother's lighthouses in their cardboard box in the basement and thought about setting them all out on the lawn like a little city. I kept the one on the mantel and gave 2 to the thrift store on Wayne Avenue and wrapped the rest in newsprint and left them on a shelf where they carried nothing. On a slow Sunday in fall, June and I raked leaves into piles and then threw ourselves in like people who had arrived at the right place by accident. Up the street, Elena from apartment 3B, who had watched June when I needed 2 hours, brought us hot chocolate in mugs we had to return. Mr. Patel fixed the bolt on our gate and refused the $20 I pushed at him like an apology. Abby texted photos of her wedding dress and asked if June wanted to hold flowers at their small ceremony. June replied with a string of flower emojis, which is the new word for yes. After the last court paper was filed and the check to Lena had cleared with a note in the memo line that I considered writing "See me next Thanksgiving" and didn't, after the house finally had my name, first and last, and not as an emergency contact. After I put the binder on a high shelf and left it there for longer than a week, I stood in the living room alone late one night. I looked at the lighthouse, its little window painted with a glow, and I had a ridiculous urge to light it. I didn't. I turned off the lamp and left it in the dark. The house did not move. It stayed. Dear June, I wrote in my journal later because the letter needed to exist, because some words need a container to be real. Today I took the cardboard box out to the curb. The one with the last lighthouses. I kept the one you like. The one with the crack that looks like a smile if you squint. I wiped it with a paper towel and it left a gray smear and I didn't care. We are not what we keep, but sometimes what we keep is a record of what we chose to let go. What I learned, besides how to patch drywall and make a child laugh in a hospital room, is this: a receipt won't keep you warm at night, but it will keep you from being told you don't have a home. Epilogue Artifact. June. I'm writing this in the quiet after you've fallen asleep, which is the only hour in the day that feels like mine and yours at the same time. It's 2 weeks since we finally signed the last paper. You asked me this morning if the house knows it's ours, and I told you I think it does. Old houses notice when someone opens the window to let the night air in for no reason other than it fills your chest. When you are older and find this, maybe folded at the back of the blue sky binder or between the pages of a cookbook we never used, I want you to know a few things. Not for pity. For record. We stayed because you liked the way the light comes in the dining room in the afternoon. We stayed because Mr. Patel puts pumpkins on his porch in October and keeps them there until they've sagged into themselves with dignity. We stayed because the hall closet smells like the coats of everyone who ever walked through and left through this door, and I want your coats to be part of that smell. We didn't stay because that's what you're supposed to do. We didn't stay because family is a magic password. We didn't stay because someone told me to. We stayed because we chose to. Because you looked at me with your serious face and said, "Can we make this ours?" And I understood what you were asking before you did. Sometimes the smallest voice tells the biggest truth. You told me the night you heard Nana say it was too hard for her to watch you be sick. You told me with a child's clarity that you were not the one who was too much. And that's the whole thing. We are not too much. We are exactly the right amount. If one day we leave, it will be on a morning we've spoken about for months, with the couch wrapped in a blanket, the plants watered, and the light turned off with care. It will not be in a car before dawn without a note. It will be with lists and labels and the deliberate way you tie your shoes. I love you like a person carries a house inside them. The version of you asleep down the hall right now with socks that don't match and a bandage on her elbow from climbing too fast is my compass. When you grow up, if you find yourself in a room with a person whose love only lasts as long as the house does, know this: you can leave, and it doesn't mean you are an earthquake. It means you are a person who chose to stand where your feet are. Keep the lighthouse on the mantle until you don't need it. Or knock it down in a game of indoor bowling on a rainy day, and we'll laugh and sweep it up. Your mom, Kayla. What I learned. It's strange how things that felt private now feel useful to share. That's maybe another thing. Anybody who tells you to hide what you've been through is usually someone who benefited from the hiding. Here's what I know now. Boundaries are not a punishment. They are the shape of the life you want to live. I thought no was rude when what it was a sentence that kept us safe. Keep every piece of paper you can bear to keep. Not to build a file cabinet life, but because people will try to convince you a story happened one way, and it helps to have the dated proof that it happened another. Receipts over rumors. Always. Legal aid is not charity in the thin sense. It is a lifeline. The day Mark said, "You have options," I started to sleep again. If I could send my past self anything, it would be his business card and a note: call. Even when your voice shakes. Family can be a category you choose. The people who showed up for us lived 2 doors down, worked in the school office, rang us up at the corner store, and married my ex. It doesn't diminish what blood should be. It replaces it when blood can't be counted on. Kids will tell you the truth by accident if you let them. Listen when they say the simple version. Nana said you were too much for her. That one sentence peeled everything back. June isn't my lie detector. She is a person who gets to be protected from having to prove her own innocence. Grief and relief can sit at the same table. I wish my mother had been better at love. I wish she had stayed to say a few true things. I'm relieved she can't hurt us anymore. These are both true. Holding them both didn't break me. It made me sturdier. If you're holding papers at a kitchen table with the blinds open because you need the light to tell you you're still here, eat something, drink water, and call someone who knows a little bit more than you do. Then put your hand on the countertop and feel the cool of it. That sensation is yours. A house is walls and a roof. Home is what you decide it is. Some mornings that decision is quiet. Sometimes it is the loudest thing you'll do. Author's note: if you're dealing with grief, complicated family dynamics, or legal housing issues, check out resources like Legal Aid of Western Ohio or your local legal aid office for free civil legal help. The Dougie Center, dougie.org, for grief support, especially for children. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, thehotline.org, for help with coercive control and emotional abuse, even if there's no physical violence. 211, call 211 for local resources, rent and utility assistance, and counseling referrals. If stories like this help you feel less alone, consider following and sharing it with someone who might need it.